Last week, we talked about the what argument? Anybody remember that big C word? Cosmological, yes, the cosmological argument. We talked about the universe, the cosmos, and how the universe came about, the cause and effect idea. There was a cause because the universe is the effect. And so we came to the conclusion there had to be one of three things had to happen. Either the universe was eternal, the universe created itself from nothing, or something or someone greater than the universe created it. And surveying the evidence in the time that we did, we came to the clear and obvious conclusion, I believe, the only rational conclusion, that the universe had to be created by something or someone superior to itself. Something eternal had to create this universe, which is not eternal. And so I appreciated your time and discussion. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the teleological argument. Now, that's another four-letter word, as they say, a big word, but much more than four letters, isn't it? But again, just because I've told you before, I don't know big words, but I know that that's what this is called from a scientific standpoint. Now, does anybody know what in the world teleological means?
Well, television's trying to influence people.
Tele as in television, telephone? Mm-hmm. What is teleology? Teleology. In short, this is the design argument. That's the short English, paraphrased definition, I guess. The design argument, the case for design. And we talked about this briefly last week as we were talking about what we would discuss. Design, you've heard this, demands a what? Designer. And even the atheistic and scientific community believes this. They understand this, and they don't really have an issue with that design demands a designer. But the problem is just coming to the meeting on the middle ground as to whether or not there is design in the world. And so tonight, we're just going to take some time to see, I believe, the clear evidence of design in the universe, right? There is another law, and I'm only going to mention one law tonight. I won't put a bunch of laws on you scientifically again, but there is one law to introduce this study that I want to mention, and that's the law of rationality. Law of rationality. Anybody want to take a guess as to what that law states? Law of rationality.
One way to say it is that every conclusion that we reach can only be reached, is only warranted by the evidence that is there.
Exactly. That's the best way to say it. That's it, right? In other words, there's got to be adequate evidence for you to reach your conclusion, right? Like we talked a little bit about last week, it's not rational to suppose that turning on a light switch had something to do with knocking a book off of a table, right? That's not rational. There's no evidence that would support that light is going to move a book off of a table. But an elbow, it could be the cause, and the book falling off the table would be an appropriate effect. Law of rationality. And so we've got to rationally conclude whether or not there is design in this world. And if there is design, then there must be a designer. And so our logic, our argument would go something like this. Design demands a designer. The universe shows design. Therefore, the universe has a what? Designer. It's just a simple rational statement, okay? So let's prove that. For the rest of our time tonight, let's prove and see the design in this universe. And we're going to start on a very, very large scale, and then we're going to go down to the smallest, living organism that you can even think of. Let's begin. The universe itself, the design of the universe. Now, I mentioned last week the 14 billion light year universe in size. Now, I didn't say to you that I recall that is the observable size. In other words, what we've been able to see, which is incredible to me to fathom. But ultimately, they believe the universe is 20 billion light years total in size. They've not been able to observe every bit of it, but that is their best estimate. How they come to that, I don't know. But 20 billion light years. Now, I told you last week, 1 light year is how many miles? Approximately. 6, not million, Not billion, trillion. 6 trillion miles, approximately 1 light year. Our universe is 20 billion light years in size, from one side to the other. That is incredible. And that's just really based on their best supposition. It could be even larger than that. Absolutely incredible. And yet this just came about, according to those who believe in evolutionary theory, by this period that exploded. And by the way, somebody mentioned to me just a minute ago, I won't mention his name but in case he doesn't want me to, but he came in and he said, I was thinking about something. He said, what if another period or 2 more periods exploded the way that one did? That's a good question, right? What if there was another period that just decided it was going to explode right now? What would happen? We'd have some serious collisions, wouldn't we? And as another brother said, it'd be the end of the world. I guess so. So it's just, there's a lot of hard, and as somebody said last week, it takes a lot of faith to believe in something like that, even more so than it does God, because there's so much evidence as we're looking at. There's also 1 billion galaxies. I just find this, it's so hard to even really picture the size of this universe. We live in one galaxy. What's our galaxy called? The Milky Way. The sun, the planets, all of that, we're in one galaxy. One. There are estimated 1 billion of them. The Bible says that you cannot count, you cannot numerate the stars. And we haven't been able to do that, but they certainly have an estimated guess as to how many there are, and this is what they have. They say there is 25 sextillion stars. You have trillion, quadrillion, quintillion, sextillion. That is a lot of zeros. 25 sextillion stars they suppose are in this universe. That is absolutely incredible. All of this supposedly coming from just a little period that exploded. Our galaxy alone would take 100,000 years to cross at the speed of light. Right, they estimate our galaxy to be 588 quadrillion miles in length. At the speed of light, it would take 100,000 years just to cross the Milky Way. We're not even talking about the other 1 billion galaxies in this universe. That is absolutely incredible. Now, let's kind of go and narrow this down. We're talking on a huge scale here that we can't even really fully fathom. But let's talk about something else that's in our particular galaxy, our solar system, and that is the sun. The sun is the largest ball or body, I guess, that we know of in our solar system, the sun itself. In fact, they say that the sun is 864,000 miles in diameter, if you can begin to picture that. It is, in mass-wise, 333,000 times the size of the Earth. You could take 109 Earths and put them in a straight line, and that would be just the width of the sun. There's no telling. I'm sure you could find the number as to how many Earths you could fit in it, but it's 333,000 times the size of Earth, so I guess that kind of puts it into perspective there. What a huge entity. This sun converts 8 million tons of matter into energy per second. All right? Now, if you're like me, you're thinking, I don't really know if that's big or if that's impressive. From what I understand in my studies, we have, as humanity, since the creation of the world, not yet converted 8 million tons of matter into energy one time. In all of it combined, we've not converted that much matter into energy yet. Some, 6,000 years that the world's been here. So, 8 million tons of matter per second the sun is converting. That is absolutely incredible. The interior temperature at the most core center of the sun, they suppose exceeds 20 million degrees Celsius. That is a hot ball of fire. And we are 93 million miles from it. And this is very significant. Why does it matter the distance we are from the sun? Well, you think about such a huge number, 93 million miles, but why is that significant as far as we're concerned here on Earth? Yeah, that's right. Right? If we were much closer. Now here's how you can word this 2 ways, and there's a huge difference in the way you look at this. We could say, if you are about 9 or 10 million miles closer to the sun, what's going to happen? You're going to burn up. It's going to be too hot. We can't survive. We're going to die. The Earth's going to be destroyed. If you go 9 to 10 million miles farther away from the sun, what's going to happen? It's going to be cold. Now, if you look at it in 9 to 10 million miles, that sounds like a huge gap, a huge range of discrepancy that you can work with. But ultimately, 9 to 10 million miles is only what percentage of 93 million? About 10%. So ultimately, what we're really talking about here is if the Earth was 10% closer to the sun, we would burn up. If it was 10% farther away, we would freeze to death. And when you look at it as a percentage, which is ultimately the picture, right? Because again, millions is such a big number that we just think, wow, that's a huge gap there, right? 10 million miles forward or backwards, but it's really just a small percentage in the large picture. To put it simpler, if you had 10 feet and you were 1 foot closer or 1 foot farther, that's the same percentage, to put it into perspective. There isn't a very big gap to move. In fact, this is even more interesting because of the Earth's revolution. We're going to talk about it in a minute, and we'll come back to this point because that 93 million alters just a bit. Very, very interesting. Let's talk about the Earth. All right. Again, we're just throwing in facts and interesting things, I believe, and we're going to see the design even more so in just a moment. But let's talk about the Earth. What is significant about this word that we often say, atmosphere? What does the word atmosphere mean when you talk about the Earth? What is the Earth's atmosphere? What are we referencing? Okay, yeah, we're talking about what surrounds the Earth ultimately, and there's a huge diagram you could get into and how they've named all the different sections. But Earth's atmosphere also itself gives evidence for design. What is the purpose, or what does that atmosphere, or think of the ozone layer in particular, what does the layers around the Earth and the air and the gases surrounding it, what purpose do they serve? Protection. Protection, very, very critical. And we don't always necessarily think about what's going around the Earth and its purpose, but there's design even in that. It protects the Earth. Our atmosphere protects us from a number of things. One of them is coming from the sun. Speaking of the sun, what does the sun emit that is very harmful to humanity, to our bodies? Radiation, yeah, ultraviolet rays. And the atmosphere, we have another protective barrier we'll talk about in a moment, but the atmosphere is that first one that protects. Most of those ultraviolet rays don't even make it to us because of that ozone layer, because of the atmosphere and that protective barrier that just happened to be placed there apparently based on evolutionary theory. It also protects us from the sun. There are solar winds. Again, these are things that are just very interesting, but apparently there are solar winds that come in contact all the time with Earth's atmosphere, and it's filling with particles and atoms and all of these different electrons and protons and this and that. You can look up, and it's coming at an extremely fast speed, hitting the Earth's surface, and if it made it to us, it would be very harmful. They would kill us ultimately. But what happens when those particles at such high speeds hit the Earth's atmosphere? They disintegrate. They just burn up. They don't ever make it to us, right? Do you remember, as far as sending a rocket out of Earth, why was it so hard for so long for us to get out of Earth? What happens when you get up I don't know exactly how many miles up it is, but once you get up there and you get close to that atmosphere, what becomes a problem? Yeah, it becomes very dense and things. So it took us a while to kind of break through. It takes a lot of power to get through that atmosphere. And so it's there, and it serves a purpose, and that is to protect us. Oh, is that right? Had to go at an angle to get through it instead of hitting it head on, I guess. Very, very interesting. Let's talk about something else about Earth, very significant. And you probably remember this to some degree. I'm sure you all study this in your classes, in science class. The Earth has a rotation and it has a revolution. And you know those words and you know what's going on there, but this is very significant. First of all, let's talk about the rotation. What do we mean that the Earth has a rotation? It's turning. Yeah, it's turning. At the Earth's equator, now we're talking about the speed of the rotation, so we're going to the largest section. Now, at the Earth's equator, the Earth spins at 1,000 miles per hour, best we understand, on average. 1,000 miles per hour, the Earth is rotating. How long does it take for the Earth, at that speed, to circle or go all the way around one point? If you were to put a speck on there and for it to go all the way around, how long does that take? 24 hours. That's what a day is, right? What does rotation control? What happens here, as far as we're concerned, what's happening around us that's caused by the rotation? Night and day, for one. Night and day occurs. What else is going on because of that rotation? There's something else that is controlled by that spin. Do you know what it is? Okay, you've got gravity, you've got tides. You've also got, and I wasn't even going to mention those. John Lee? Sorry? I keep speaking when you're speaking. Say it again. The weather, very good. The weather, excellent. In fact, even more specifically, he's right on. Temperature control. In fact, if the rotation of the earth was much faster, there would be cyclones, scientists say, all over the earth. If it went much slower, we would burn up. The temperature would become too hot without that spinning of the earth. In fact, they use Venus as an example. It takes Venus 243 of our days for it to rotate once. And its temperatures reach 500 degrees Celsius at their peaks. And so there's temperature control, weather control. There is the night and day control just in that rotation. All right? Now, if that's not enough, while the earth is spinning 1,000 miles per hour, it's also doing what? Revolving. What does that mean? Yeah, it's orbiting, right? It's also moving. It's spinning at 1,000 miles per hour, and we can't even feel that. Isn't that incredible? We're spinning right now at 1,000 miles per hour. And then at the same time, while it's spinning, it's moving at 70,000 miles per hour. Now, how long does it take for it to orbit one full time and come back to its original location? That's it, 365 in 1/4 day. Miss Biologist down here is going to tell us about it. She knows it, but that's that's what a year is, and that's why we have leap year, because it's about 0.249, whatever. You can look up that number, but in essence, it's a fourth of a day extra, and so we have leap years. And so in that 365 and 1/4 day, you do one full revolution around the sun. Now, on top of that, we've now discovered that the sun has its own orbit or revolution. And according to modern science, they believe it takes the sun 226 million years for it to complete its orbit. 223 million times the length it does Earth. That's how large the sun. And so the sun is supposedly, again, this is just based on what their best guess is to know. And so let's say, whatever the case, the sun is moving and the Earth is moving at the same time. And yet, in all of this time that the world's been here, it's yet to get too close or too far away. It's interesting to me. I want to pull a chart up here for you to see. It's very interesting. I always remembered this because I was fascinated with it in school. The closest we ever are to the sun, we might think, would be in what season? Summer. We would suppose that we're closest to the sun in the summer. However, we're closest to the sun in what month? January, that's right. We're closest to the sun in January. Kind of surprising. And we are farthest from the sun in what month? July. The orbit of the Earth is not a circle, it's an elliptical. It goes in an oval shape, if you will. And so during that means it's going to be a little farther and a little closer at times. In January, we're actually, 93 million is the number they pick because it's kind of the average. But in January, we're actually just over 91 million miles away from the sun. And in July, we're more than 94 million miles away from the sun. Again, why is that significant? Because I told you, and science tells us, scientists know, that if we exceeded that much more in that give to or from, we'd burn up or freeze to death. Not only is that involved, but what else causes the difference here in these seasons and temperatures? What else is going on about the Earth that's very unique? You see it here, the tilt. You see that line that's at an angle? The Earth is on an axis that it's tilted 23.5 degrees. And so that's part of the reason why, if you kind of see on the chart up here, well, you can't really see that laser, but you see what hemisphere are we in here in the United States, by the way? Northern or southern? Northern. We're in the northern hemisphere. The northern hemisphere, in January, we are kind of tilted away from the sun a little bit. But even more than that, as I was studying this, the southern hemisphere has a lot more water than the northern. There's a lot more land up here. And water, again, we're not even really going to get into the water, but how much of the Earth is covered in water? Do you remember?
3/4 or so.
Yeah, about 3/4. 72%, I think, is the most recent number I saw of the Earth is water. And water, as you know, is much more mild in its temperature changes compared to land. And so the water that we have is just enough to help the Earth control the climate, control the weather, especially in the southern hemisphere, but it affects us as well. In fact, if you want to get technical here, right where we're located, summers are not quite as bad here as they are, say, in Orlando, because we're right next to what? to the ocean. I know it's very minute on such a small scale, but the water in the summer heats up from the coolness of the winter. It heats up a lot slower than land does. And the water's always cooler. That's why the oceans in the summertime, it's fun to get into water. It's cooler than the temperature outside. And then as winter comes, it takes a long time for that water to decrease temperature and cool off. And so you've got a little bit of some warmth in that water. That water becomes warmer, maybe not in Florida, but in some other places, than it is the weather outside, maybe up in Maine or something of that effect. But that's how that water works. And so there's so many things about the earth that we could discuss. By the way, one other thing I want to give you about this, when the earth gets a little bit closer to the sun, it's programmed to speed up a little bit. Why would the earth do that? We now know that the earth spins a little faster than 1,000 miles per hour as it gets a little closer to the sun in January. Why do you think that is? Okay, maybe somewhat. I didn't even think about the temperature. That's true. The temperature would certainly be affected by that. If it's spinning faster, that's cooler. Remember, slower is going to be warmer like Venus. That's a very good point. Didn't even think about that. But also because just like Earth, the sun has a what? A pull. What do we call that? Gravity. It has a pull. And so the earth has to spin a little bit quicker, so what doesn't happen? Yeah.
Lose its gravitational stability.
Exactly. So it doesn't lose its gravitational stability. Couldn't word it any better than that. So it's not pulled into the sun. And in July, it's a little slower. The rotation slows down a little bit so as not to get too far out. Again, all of this is amazingly controlled so that the earth doesn't get too far or too close to the sun, even in its elliptical orbit, its rotation, and the sun's orbit as well. Now, you're going to tell me that all of that just happened by chance. All of those, we just covered a small, minute portion of it. But that is absolutely incredible. We talked a little about the axis as well. And by the way, that tilt is what causes our what throughout the year? Seasons. The seasons. Boy, what incredible. God knew what He was doing, didn't He? Only God could create such a beautiful, beautiful place for us to live and design it the way it is. There's more design in this universe than there is in probably, I guess, every computer in the world combined. And nobody would believe that an explosion would build a computer. So why would we believe that a dot smaller than a period would build the universe? It's just not rational. It defies the law of rationality. That's all there is to it. Let's keep going. Let's go down a little more now, down more small scale, I should say, and talk about the human body. The human body itself also is a huge example of design. And I wanted to talk about animals too, and I didn't even put it on here because you know me. If I've got it on here, I'm going to do my best to get through it all, and I'll rush through it, and I don't want to do that. So I want to give you a few things about the human body and then some discussion. But the human body shows design. I told you that there's something else that also protects us from the UV rays. The atmosphere gets most of it, but the little bit that comes through is protected. What protects our organs from those UV rays? Skin. The skin is a fascinating machine. It is a fascinating organism. It makes up a large portion, as you know, of the body. It is the exterior. And it is something that we as humans absolutely have not even come close to designing. And as we go through this and you see the function of the skin, you'll know why we can't design anything close to the abilities that the skin has. For example, the skin does protect the body. Not only does it protect us from the UV rays, it protects us from harmful bacteria. It protects our fragile organs from cuts, from bruises. It is a shield. It's the body's shield, and it holds everything in, right? Speaking of that, what would go everywhere, and you don't have to be too specific, but what would happen if the skin wasn't here internally? What's it holding in? Everything. That's true, literally everything. And the skeletal system has some part of that, but what is literally something that's going to just, blood, liquid, fluids is what I was getting at. Fluids, water, a huge portion of the body is just water. And so it protects, it's waterproof. That skin, not only does it keep things out, but it's waterproof. It keeps the fluids inside the body. Fluids don't come out. Now, that being said, it's very interesting how the skin works, Because true or false, things can get through the skin. True. There are what's in the skin that allows things to come through. What do we call those? Pores. You know all about those pores, right? And when I was a teenager and my face was all bumped up, I really learned about pores. Called it acne. That was an awful time for me. And I still have to fight it a little bit. But yeah, there are pores. And so you can put lotion on the skin, for example, and it will absorb that moisture. And the skin is such an incredible organism. It's such an incredible part of the body. It's also sensitive. This is probably the hardest thing for us to, we just cannot replicate this. The skin not only protects, not only is it waterproof, but it senses. It feels touch because of the nerve endings in it. You can talk about touch, you can talk about temperature changes. It feels heat, it feels cool, and tells you what it's feeling. That's incredible. You can feel whether something is soft or something is hard, right? You can think about whether something is dry or something is wet. Your skin can do all of these functions. I mean, and it's stretchable, it's movable, right? To some degree. It's sensitive, very, very interesting. It has glands. The skin houses two major glands, the sweat glands, which have what function for the body? Cooling, the cooling of the body. It also, I was learning and doing this research, it also does some garbage disposal work as well, the way the information was putting it. But primarily it serves to cool the body. When you get hot, you sweat, and that cools you off, right? You see that in animals as well, like a dog. How does a dog sweat? Through the tongue. You see it panting, that's right, and it's dripping. Well, it's cooling its body off. That's how it either was designed or happened by chance, whichever it is. I think we know the answer. Also, by the way, with the glands, the oil glands are there as well. And what do the oil glands do? What purpose do they serve, do you think? Lubricate. They moisten the skin, right? Maybe some of you are like me, and especially on my head and on my face, I don't oil maybe as well as I could. For whatever reason, my skin is very dry, and so I have to kind of put some lotion on it. You know what happens to the skin if it dries out. Well, why is it that your body doesn't just dry out completely? Because of those oil glands. And sometimes that most exterior, most outer layer gets a little bit dry, but those oil glands are working. It's also a blood highway. The skin is involved with 33% of the blood's movement through the body, through the capillaries, the vessels, those kinds of things that are in the skin. So much going on. And finally, it also houses lots of hair. Now, we don't like hair very much, or I don't. I'm not a big fan of hair. Sometimes I think to myself, I just wish I didn't have to shave every day. I wish it would go away. But then I began to think about the fact that it's very important, isn't it? What are some of the purposes of hair? Mr. John Lee? Okay, it does. It does have a little bit of effect on our body temperature, absolutely. What else does hair do? It's a smart young man. Sorry? Protects. It does. It sure does. In fact, as far as like things like the nose and ears are concerned, we think, ooh, we've got hair. But what is that hair doing? What's it there for? It's a filter. Exactly. That's the key word. It's a filter. Keeps things from particles and those kind of things. It protects our ears and our nose. What else does hair do?
You may not be looking for this one, but actually it distinguishes the sexes, which is not probably a lot of reasoning that you're going in. Because I remember learning one time that and Amber may correct me on this, but one time I remember reading, thinking when I was a kid, why do girls have long hair and guys have shorter hair? Not the guys can't grow their hair. But I learned that there was a sort of a difference in the genes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we kind of need to know who's a male and who's a female for a lot of reasons.
Absolutely.
Civilization. So.
And that's part of it, which brings me to one of the thoughts I was looking for. And speaking of that, hair, and I never really thought about this until I was doing this research. Hair is kind of like the earth, it's programmed. Have you ever noticed if you just leave hair alone and you let it grow, now maybe not the head's a little different because it ends up growing so long, but every hair on your body is programmed to at a certain point to quit what? Growing. How does that work? How does it just happen to stop growing? If men, you let your chest hair grow out, it's not going to grow out and come down and go to the floor, right? Some of you women are going, gross. But why is that? If you let it grow out, it's going to just grow. It might curl a little bit, but it's just going to go to a certain length and it's going to stop growing, right? your arms, right? I don't shave, and there's some people that lift weights and things like that, they shave their arms. If I was to shave my arms, or you were, your hair's going to grow back, but is it going to grow longer than it is right now? No. Why is that? It's programmed. Hairs on your arms not going to grow out like a Maltese dog or something like that, where it just comes out and it doesn't work that way. Why? How does that happen? We don't fully understand it, but it's programmed to stop at a certain length. That is, again, just plethora of evidence for design. Yes, ma'am.
It's interesting. Bill and I were at the when we were there at the hospital the other night. This woman came in, this lady doctor came in, and you hardly ever see this, but a woman being bald, and she
Yes.
was completely bald, and she had very good outline on herself, though she wasn't embarrassed about it.
Yes.
She didn't wear a big wig or anything, but it's usually men that are ones that lose their hair.
That's true.
Women don't.
That's true.
It's a rarity.
And that's kind of a separation between the genders too. For the most part, there are exceptions, but usually it's the men that, we tend to recede and lose hair, and right, they talk about the hair and how some people's hair is parted and then some is departed. Some of it's gone. So, but there's a lot of truth to that. But a lot of times you don't see that. Some of you are just getting that, I can tell. But sometimes there are exceptions to that. And sometimes too, you never know when people might have gone through some radiation and things like that could have caused that, and that's sad. But it shouldn't be. It's all right. We are who we are, and the exterior doesn't matter. It's the interior that does. But the hair is incredible. I also learned, and then we'll move on, that the hair under the skin especially works as a lever for the oil glands. The hairs help the oil to be produced. And so I think that's also very interesting. Again, I want to repeat this part. We today, and then we'll get Miss Julie, we today have not and cannot in any way create or design a material that works like the skin, that can do all of these functions that we're not even close to producing something like that. And yet, an explosion caused that. Evolution caused that. It's just really, really, really improbable. And that's an understatement to say really, 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 really. Yes, ma'am, Miss Julie?
I was just going to say that your eyelashes keep your eyes from...
Yes, thank you. I meant to mention that. Eyelashes are very unique as well. I meant to say that with the nose and the ears. The eyelashes have a couple of purposes. They help your eyes from drying out. Again, they're also programmed to a certain length. Usually ladies are a little longer than men. And furthermore, the eyelashes warn your eyelids. If something touches your eyelash, what are you going to do? You're going to close your eyes. It's just an automatic response. If you touch your eye, it's very hard. If somebody even comes close and touches you, it's the eyelashes that are doing that, and they're programmed to just cause that eyelid to retreat. Very, very interesting. Very good point. I'm so glad you brought that up. Again, just hair. Who knew that it could be so important? All right, let's keep going. What about this one? Again, we're just getting smaller and smaller. We're going to have 2 more points, and we're going to go to the smallest of all. But let's talk about just a smaller portion of the body. In fact, a very, very small percentage of your weight, teeny tiny, is the eyeball. They're the 2 eyeballs that you have. And yet, they house incredible arguments for design. The eyeball itself processes 80% of all the information that goes through your body, through the eyes into the brain, of course. Now the brain, we're not even going to talk about the brain. It is an incredible entity itself. In fact, it's been called the most complex, most incredible bit of matter in the universe is the human brain. The computer can't even come close to doing what a brain can. But it processes through the eyeball 80% of all information that is processed right here, just in that little ball. And what's happening is really interesting. The pupil and the iris, and you've seen this. Let's say you have your eyes dilated. What are they doing to your eye when they do that? Why do you have to wear shades when you go outside after doing that? Yeah, they expand that pupil. That's right. If you are in the dark for a while, you begin to be able to see a little clearer. What's happening? What's your pupil doing? Yeah, it's expanding, right? Again, your eyeball knows to do that. It allows a certain amount of light into the eye in a process called refraction. And so when it's very bright, when you wake up in the morning and you have to squint, you have a hard time opening your eyes. Why is that? When it's closed, it's dark and the pupil's in kind of what state? Yeah, it's retracted, it's expanded. And so when you wake up, it begins to adjust by closing up. It lessens the amount of light it's letting in. and you adjust to that. That's incredible. That light, that picture that you see, even as we speak right now, your eyeballs, the light is going into your eye through a lens, and the easiest way I know to explain this, and for me to even understand it as I was studying this, is that it takes the picture, your eyeball, and it inverts it and sends it to the back of your eye. It's inverted, not only up and down inverted, but also left to right. This was very interesting to me. And then, this is all in a millisecond of time. It throws the picture, it's flipped and flipped again, and then it cuts it in half, and the right section is sent to the left side of the brain, and the left section of that picture, image, inverted image, is sent to the right side of the brain, and the brain processes that information and you respond. All of that happens just like that. Your eyeball, I was reading, does more. If you were to run, I think it said you would have to run over 55 miles in a day for your leg muscles to do the work that your eyeball muscles do. And as far as size is concerned, they're the strongest, one of the strongest muscles in the body, the tongue being one of them as well. But very, very interesting. 137 million light sensory cells are on the back of that eyeball doing that work. Flipping it, spinning it, throwing it into your brain, all in just a flash. Very, very interesting. That image is halved and given. Let's conclude, though, with the smallest of all, the cell. In your body, you have over, a trillion, I believe it is? 100 trillion. No, that's way different. 100 trillion cells in the body, over 250 kinds. In other words, you've got your bone cells, your blood cells, white cells, oil, the gland cells, all man, we get 250 of them. I wouldn't even try. I couldn't probably name 10 of them, much less 250. But there are a total of over 100 trillion cells in your body. Your cells, again, this is something that you have to take a microscope to even look at it, and yet it's full of design. Right? Cell membrane. This cell is comprised of 3 major parts. And this is not complicated, I promise. If it was, I couldn't even do it. But cell membrane is just the skin, if you will, and it works very much like the skin of the body. It controls, and it's 0.07 micrometers in width. I mean, it's just tiny, tiny, tiny. And it controls what comes in and out of the cell, just like the skin does, even in something so small. Inside of the cell is the cytoplasm, and that's all this area right in here, all this light blue, and everything that's going on, anything inside it is just the cytoplasm of it. If you think anything under the skin of the body, that's kind of the idea of the cell. That whole section, that's where the mitochondria, you remember that word? That produces the energy for the cell, that's where it's located. The ribosomes that produce the protein, the endoplasmic reticulum, the highway, all of those things, and they're big words, but they're all things that are going on. Let me put it this way, though. This is much simpler, I can understand this. That cell, all of those things inside it, produce the nutrients. It has its own garbage disposal system with the liposomes, zomes, I believe it is, something like that. You see how much I know? Liposomes? Thank you. Oh, you got some teachers in here that'll help me out. I appreciate that. You've got garbage disposal, you've got communication, you've got the highway system that's transporting all of this. And on top of all of that, probably the brain, the most important aspect of the cell is the what? The nucleus. The nucleus. And that's the brain. That's where the DNA is housed, the genetic code. And that we could do a whole class just on DNA and the design therein. But one thing I want to mention about it, and then we're going to move on to the end of the lesson. But DNA it's microscopic, of course, and it's all spiraled up and placed inside of that nucleus. But they say if you were to take the DNA out of one nucleus, out of one cell, and you were to stretch it out, it would be 6 feet in length. It's so microscopic and compact that if you were to stretch it out, and I think, how is that even possible? Scientists say that if you took all of the DNA out of your entire body, your genetic code, and you were to unravel it and stretch it out, true story now, look this up, they say it would go to the sun and back. 186 million miles, they suppose. What? I was thinking about that all day long. I thought, how is that even possible? And I had to tell you this. I was outside and I was filling in, it's recycling day tomorrow, so I was putting boxes in, and then it hit me. I was like, what am I doing right now in order to maximize how many of these boxes I can put? If you were to take 3 boxes, large boxes, and put them into that big old can, that's going to fill it up. But if you take the tape off and compress it, and turn it into a flat, all of a sudden you can put a lot of boxes in that. Are you with me? So you're talking about a DNA that's, and let's say you grinded it up into these little bitty pieces, then how many boxes could you put in there, right? You've got that DNA that's huge in length, microscopically, that is compressed and grinded up into these small little, and it fits inside of a cell. Again, that screams design. You've got a distance the length of the sun and back inside of a cell. That is absolutely incredible. Only an eternal being could do something like that. Let's conclude with some discussion questions before we leave. Any thoughts, by the way, or questions about this so far? I just spit out about 40 minutes of just information, but design about all kinds of different things that I hope is interesting. And I hope just in this one class that to some degree hearing this stuff just builds your faith even more and reminds you that there is a God. And that is the only way that these things could be true. There's design in the largest thing we know, the universe. The universe itself has design all the way down. If you were to zoom in all the way to a cell on Earth, microscopic entity, that cell has design. And you're going to tell me that all that happened by chance. I can't believe that. I just don't have enough faith to believe that. I don't do it. Any thoughts, though, so far?
What are your thoughts about global warming?
That's so funny. We were talking about that earlier today, global warming. And I thought about, we may actually spend some time on that because I think there's a lot of interest on it. In short, I don't believe that global warming is happening like they say. But I tell you what, let's do that. Let me write it down and do that because I don't know a whole lot about it as much as I'd like to answer your question. But I know what they suppose. They talk about the ice caps that are melting and talk about the temperature changes and the increase. There seems to be, it's funny, there was a huge following of this idea of a global warming. And now it seems that from what I'm seeing that less and less are believing that that's really going on over the past few years. But I want to do some more research on it before I really answer that question. I know that's not what you want to hear, but somebody else may have some more thoughts on it, though.
What if it is global warming? Just say, what if it is global warming?
Okay.
And take that scenario that it is. We shouldn't worry about it. God's in control.
Oh, yes. Yeah, even if it's a real...
If it goes off too much, it's going to be destroyed in the end anyway.
That's right.
This earth will no longer be here.
That's right.
On the planet.
It's not going to be a slow process.
Yeah.
It's going to be like the beginning that God said, let there be, and it was.
Yeah.
When he comes as a thief in the night, it's going to be quick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be it's going to be burned up. It doesn't seem to be a large overtime kind of thing. But like you say, even if it is, and I don't know what they're projecting. I don't know what the projections are. For those who believe that the Earth's going to eventually be uninhabitable, I don't know what they're projecting. If anybody does, how long that is. But even if that was the case, we shouldn't worry, like you say. But I think it would be worth looking into it and doing a little research on that. And I certainly will. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't think that, I think it's a really bifurcated discussion. I think there are two, you can cut this issue into two parts so that they're separate, that they don't contradict each other. I think as Christians, we have to acknowledge that it is possible for man to actually do things that can pollute and veritably destroy certain of nature's functions and systems.
Yeah.
That's the one side.
Yeah.
On the other side,
And there are consequences.
There's really nothing that we can do to actually do anything to totally destroy the earth. And so those two things have to be, like for example, we've almost wiped out all kinds of beautiful animals like eagles and things because of the chemicals that we polluted rivers with, that the fish eat. That the fish eat and that the eagles eat them. And those things, so you see what I'm saying? I mean, there
Absolutely.
are things that man can do to alter the balance of nature.
Yes.
And we need to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I don't think there's anything, because the creation of God is so vast and it has properties that only God could instill in it, that we can't really ultimately destroy it.
Right.
I think those two things have to be compatible in the discussion, and we have to accept the reality that there are bad things that man can do in nature.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that he can ultimately destroy all of them.
Yes. For purposes of the audio, let me repeat a little bit of that. We can harm nature. We can certainly do things that have consequences on earth, but ultimately destroying the earth is a totally different picture. Can we really destroy the earth? Probably not. And so he's talking about those things being compatible in this discussion. And that was a short coverage of what he mentioned, but just for purposes of those listening by audio. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Renee.
I don't think we should worry about any of that.
Again, we don't need to worry about it ultimately, though, do we?
Because the righteous will meet him in the sky, so what do we got to worry about?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. The righteous are going to meet him in the sky. And, yeah, that's right. There's a scripture for that. And it is, though. It is an interesting question and discussion. And I do want to take some time because I know it's funny, it was brought up earlier today and then it was brought up in class. I should have just went ahead and prepared for that. But not that it necessarily goes with this topic, but we will discuss it further and do some research on it. Because somebody had a hand up over here. Yes, sir.
I just want to say it's always been interesting to me, you're talking about the universe being so huge,
Yes.
being so small.
Yes.
But science has said that a cell is like the universe in microcosm.
That's a great point.
The waves, the electrons, orbits.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's true. Scientists talk about, he was talking about the cell itself is almost described as a little universe itself and all the things that are going on, all the parts. And what a great point. That's exactly right. Absolutely incredible. All right, a discussion question or two. Why is design in nature a strong argument for God's existence? Why is design such a strong argument?
Too complex to just happenstance.
Yeah, that's it. It's just too complex for it just to be happenstance, for it just to have happened by chance. It's just so improbable. Absolutely. Any other thought on that, Renee?
God so loves the world. And he gave his only son. We have that promise, I believe, because he so loved it, he created all this.
Yep.
He so loved it. He wanted us all to go to heaven. All that we'll do was obey his word. That's all we have to do.
Yep. That's right. He loved us so much, he created this world. And we get to live in it. Absolutely. What about this one?
Man has been so disappointing to God.
What's that? We've
Man has
been so disappointing. Yep.
In our eyes, it would be so disappointing to have the setbacks that they've had time after time after time.
Yep.
His people have turned away from it. And that's why we have to continue to be as strong as we can, to study as much as we can, and to take advantage of every opportunity that we can
That's right.
to help others turn to God.
That's right. Can you imagine, like you said, how disappointing that must be for God to have done all that he's done and then for us to sin, to turn our backs on him like we do? It absolutely has to be
But he told us
disappointing.
what he'll do. If you disappoint him, he'll destroy you.
That's right. That's exactly right. Why is it that scientists can predict comets, trips to the moon, and eclipses?
They follow the pattern.
Exactly. We didn't even talk about that, did we? I meant to talk about that earlier, but that's why I put it here, multiple reasons, but one is I didn't know if I'd remember to or not. I didn't have a slide on it. But because of that pattern, because it's so predictable, because there are these laws that cannot be broken, that are never defied, they know we can go to the moon and back. Even though everything's moving, we can get to the moon because everything is precise and orderly, not just chance. It's all working together. That's right. They couldn't do it without that order. And that order came from God. That's exactly right. That's it.
Another way to say it is that it's all, the universe and all these things, it's a mechanical operation.
It is. That's a good point.
There's a mechanical operation. Somebody has to set that in motion. Somebody has to create that machine to do all of that work. And that's,
Yep.
it's just implausible to think of anything else. I mean, machines just don't materialize out of nothing and start working.
Yeah.
And reliably producing work and output and data. They just don't do it.
That's right. Machines don't just happen. Any machine you can think of. We created that machine. And yet, you think of the universe, it's the largest machine that exists. It is a machine. That's exactly right. And obviously, it had to be created. There's no way it just happened by chance. very quickly, what stands out to you most between the sun, the earth, and the moon? And by the way, the moon, that distance thing is there too. That controls the tides we referenced earlier. But what stands out to you most about the sun, moon, and earth and stars? What's probably the greatest bit of evidence there that sticks out in your mind for design? Light?
Light, I mean, between the sun, earth, and moon.
It is. It's fascinating, isn't it? We didn't really even get into that, did we? Yeah.
I need to say something else.
Yeah, they all
Well, light too, though. Yeah.
Yeah, the light, the sun and the moon make the light. That stands out most to me.
Yep.
The relationship between the sun, earth, and moon.
And that light causes the moon to, we talk about the moon and the banana, or I forget all the names for it, but the full moon, new moon. Yeah. Carlos?
Yeah, they all have to do
That's right.
with
They work
our
together.
immediate sort of sustaining of life, on Earth. Not that the whole universe is not important, but those, those three right there, are the most important local, interplanetary things that sustain life for us here
Yep.
on this Earth. And without one of them, without the sun or the moon, everything else would be out of whack.
Exactly. It wouldn't work. None of the three entities could exist without the other. They are absolutely connected. All right, our time is just about up. So any last minute thoughts, questions, concerns before we dismiss? I appreciate so much you being here, and I hope you'll be back next week. Very quickly, let me just mention this is what we're going to discuss next week. How do we account for our system of morality? We're going to talk about morality next week, and we'll call that, as it's been called, the anthropological argument. We're talking about ethics and morality, and that also screams a designer, a creator, a God, an eternal being. And so we'll look at that as even more evidence to believe and have faith that everything was created. Again, thank you so much for being here. Hope you have a safe trip home, and hope to see everyone here tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock for our Bible study as we continue to discuss that together.